This season of Area Code Batavia is brought to you by Christine Clemens, a real estate broker with App Properties Christie's International Real Estate, one of Chicagoland's most trusted brokers, helping you buy, sell, and invest in real estate. For more information and to see how much your home is worth, text HOME to 630-797-8421 or go to christineclemens.com or click the link in the show notes. This episode of Area Code Batavia is brought to you by Bulldog Plumbing Incorporated. For more information or to schedule an appointment, visit their website in the show notes or give them a call at 630-313-9109.
Everyone, business, people, individuals, families, all kind of coexist and mingle with each other within all of the spaces that we visited and with all the people that we've met. Like, it's not just the individual that, like Ben was saying, it's a community, which is bigger than just the individual.
Hey everybody, you're listening to another episode of Area Code Batavia, a podcast about what it means to belong in Batavia, Illinois. Today is the first of what will probably be a series of episodes that is really less of a long-form interview like I've been doing and more of sort of a panel discussion or just a conversation about topics, events, goings-on here in Batavia. So I'm excited to try that out. We'll still be doing long-form interviews. They'll just be more occasional. Today I'm talking to a couple of people from Plimsoll. If you've subscribed to our social media, you might have seen the videos that they've made. They've been collaborating with us almost from the beginning. They reached out very early on to sort of propose a collaboration where they're producing the social media videos for us that you might have seen. They are a full-service marketing agency here in Batavia, located out of that Challenge building. Today I'm talking to Ben Wydra and Lauren Purdy. Specifically, I wanted to talk to Plimsoll because I wanted to talk about storytelling and stories and how stories can impact a community like Batavia. I've had the chance to hear and share a lot of stories over the past 20 episodes, and those stories are really interesting in the way that they impact us personally and the community as well. And so I wanted to explore that with Ben and Lauren. They have their own unique perspective. You know, they've been showing up at these locations and sort of videoing and meeting the owners, and I wanted to talk out and process some of what we've experienced over the last 20 episodes. And so we've all been impacted by these stories, and I hope you have too. So I wanted to explore that today in this episode. All right, here it is. Enjoy. Lauren and Ben, I want to start by talking about stories and like really digging into what a story is about and what it does. In particular in this context of Batavia, but before we get there, Plimsoll is about stories. Can you talk about like what is important about stories?
I grew up playing sports.
Okay.
You hear epic, great sports stories.
Yes, I cry at every
You watch
sports
the
movie.
movies, and I feel like that kind of inspired it, and I like being able to take that into a different medium of like what we're doing here today.
Yeah. Ben, why did you do that? Is this always something you were interested in with stories?
Well, I think I come from a fine arts background. I always gravitated towards video, animation, moving pictures, storytelling. Yeah. And I think a lot of that just came from having a really good idea, like up here in my brain, and then not having either the facilities, the patience, or the right words to put on a page.
Yes. And
I found it incredibly easier for me to draw that thing, to make some quickie little video with my buddies, to put something together that provided as like a visual storytelling medium. And that's always been an aspect of, kind of what I did. And the reason why we started what we do here at Plimsoll was because we all had that mindset. We all kind of grew up making our own videos. We all grew up kind of doing things on the fly to kind of bring a big idea to life.
Right.
And I think that's what kind of connects all of us on a non-business side here, and also in a very personal side is, again, we just really like creating things that are going to resonate with a lot of different people in a lot of different ways.
Yeah.
On the flip side, too, I read a lot. So it's a
Yep.
physical story
What
that
do you
I'm
read?
into. Oh, gosh, I read a lot of everything.
Fiction?
Fiction, mainly, not so much nonfiction, but a lot of thrillers, rom-coms, all of that fun stuff. But I was always decent at writing. So I did like writing and telling those stories. So even from like the marketing perspective, we take stories and we tell them. So whether that's helping a business or helping a person.
Yeah.
So I feel like everything is all encompassing around those stories. And what I like about what we do here is taking that, whether it is the individual and we're telling a story about employees and we're spotlighting those employees, or we're telling the business story, which ultimately trickles down into those people.
Yeah.
It's all about them.
Well, I mean, when we first connected with you, Richard, and you were talking about this thing that you had going, it really resonated with us because it had all these pieces that we already knew we cared about. It was like a thing that we knew we were good at. You know, just the topic of focusing on businesses in Batavia. We're a business in Batavia.
Right.
And we were like, okay, we know these people. We know their stories, or at least we thought we did. And I'm excited to kind of get into that.
Yeah.
But it just all fell into sync. And I think it was because of what you mentioned in the introduction here. It was this constant recurring themes of people, their connections to within community, and then also the community that they're building just by having that presence in that community.
Okay, so one of the things you said I really liked, which is it's simple, but it's profound when you think about it, which is you take stories and you tell them, which is to say there are stories that already exist. And that resonates with me because like so much of what this podcast has been is really uncovering stories that existed that maybe just weren't told or I wasn't aware of at least. And I feel like that is that's a really profoundly important thing to do because there are so many like stories. What I find that they do is they create a three-dimensional person. They help you understand someone better, and they help you understand yourself better. But in this case, like there are those people's stories, and they're finally being told, and I find that to be really beneficial.
Yeah. Not to jump ahead, but you're onto something because I think that was one thing that we took away from everybody that we encountered on this little adventure with you is surprise at people's stories.
Yes.
Almost this kind of shock that we didn't know this already about them. You know, this business that we knew for one thing, and then as we kind of got to know them better, realized like, oh my God, you're the ones that are connected with that thing in downtown Batavia on, you know, whatever. Or you are the guys that are setting up this little community hub for trivia night or having a food truck. And you know, those little simple things that you don't really think about in the moment, but as we started to do more and more of these with you, we kind of started to realize like that was the thing that bound all of these businesses together was that like mission beyond their mission. Yeah. And ultimately the bigger red thread was the stories that were widely known by the peoples that call themselves fans, you know, customers, whatever word you want to put on it. Yeah. But rarely known by sometimes the general populace. And I'm hoping at least that, you know, through this series, more people know these stories.
It's crazy because I think there are a lot of people who are really close to some of the people I've had conversations with that had not known the exact story or the sort of the deeper ideas behind the story. That there were. I guess what I'm saying is that I talked to people who were close to people on the podcast that were surprised, just as you were.
Yeah, whether surprised by their origin story, like why they started to do what they did, or by their, I'll call it like their growth and transformation story, which was they started a business for a reason. They were successful and they loved what they were doing. They started to remodel what they did because they realized either there was a community need, there was a consumer need, there was a customer demand almost that pushed them into it, or heck, they were just like, this is something we really believe in.
Right.
We want to create a platform to make that more widely known, more accessible.
I also feel like we went into a lot of spaces where their businesses kind of evolved. Like it started as one thing, and then as they were open and talking with the community and customers and people that came in, it's kind of moved into a different space. And I know we talked about like a community hub, and you mentioned that. But it seems like a lot of the places that we went into and the people that we talked to really are focused on that. And they want to provide a space that not only is a store, for example, but it's also a place where you can have events and you can have those classes and you could teach the community and bring in, you know, your local experts and your local merchants to help broadcast what they're doing to other people and, you know, gain more interest around it.
That was definitely a recurring theme, was like the idea of providing a space for people. It started in the very beginning with Limestone, and they said other people call them the LinkedIn of Batavia, which is like this really interesting, at the time when I was recording that, I was like, that sounds horrible, because
LinkedIn no one would want to drink that coffee.
LinkedIn, well, is LinkedIn coffee good? I don't know, but like also a lot, like as a social network, LinkedIn is kind of a weird vibe, and I think it is because there's no faces, it's very text heavy. You're not hearing stories, you're hearing people's performance in front of you. You're seeing people's performance. And Limestone is very different because it is very like hyper personal. You're seeing people. I'm finally, like, my wife and I have started going there every Monday morning just as like it's the only time we can be alone together. So we just go there as a date to start the week off. And we have started seeing all of the same people every time. That really is a gift, I think. And it is something that I think has, like you mentioned, it's like continuously, like, we're hearing these stories of people want to provide that. And it's almost like you can't have enough of those places in a community. Because, you think about the population of Batavia and how many of those places you need and how many different types of people who live here. I think it makes sense. So I thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, I think that's another commonality that we've picked up on is the existence of these businesses as that third space.
Yeah.
If you're familiar with the concept of, you have home, the office, and then your third space, whatever that might be. Feel like everybody filled that role. They're trying to find a way to do what they do really well. Get people access to, in the case of Limestone, their coffee. Hearth and Hammer, really good home goods. Sturdy Shelter, awesome beer. But there's that whole second layer of, and all the layers below that, of what they're doing to foster deeper community connections and set up moments for collision, whether it's, like you mentioned, you and your wife on a Monday grabbing a coffee, or you're going to grab a drink with friends after work, or you're just meeting up after, the high school football game.
Yeah.
All of these places have this commitment to being that place that you want to go to because there's something more there to offer.
I also think most of the spaces that we've been in have been extremely welcoming. Like, even when we moved here from where we were at previously, it was like you got the sense of being welcomed into the community where you didn't feel weird about going to Limestone every week to see the same people, that you actually looked forward to going.
Right.
Because you're starting to get to know those people, and everyone's friendly and nice and welcoming, and you just feel like you belong there.
I think the same could be said for any town, USA, right? But I think there is a certain sense of accessibility, visibility, and a welcoming spirit that you get in Batavia. I'm comparing it to my experience in hometown, my experience where I live now. But there is something unique about just that accessibility that you feel around people here, where if you have an interest, you're going to find someone else that shares that interest. If you have a desire to pitch in, roll up your sleeves and help, no one's going to turn your way. In fact, they're probably going to give you 24 other people that are also sharing that same vibe with you, and have other ways that you could use your creative energy, your mental capacity, ways to kind of help them do what they're doing a little bit better. And that's been our experience too.
Welcome to Settling In with Christine Clements. On each installment of Settling In, we'll spend a couple of minutes diving deeper into what it means to make Batavia home with insights and advice from our title sponsor, local real estate expert Christine Clemens of @Properties Christie's International Real Estate. This week, I talked to Christine about how people are making a mark on Batavia themselves. How do people in Batavia think about what they want to leave Batavia? So I'm really circling this idea of legacy. When they move to Batavia, when they've been in Batavia for several years, in your experience, how are they thinking about what kind of mark they want to make on the town?
That is a very difficult question to answer. I think it depends on who it is. I could think of a handful of people that are passionate about community. I have a friend who's an alderman and in city council, and she's a force. And brilliant. I love hanging out with her. And it's very evident to me that she wants to make a difference in her community. And she steps outside of her life and her family, and she takes time away. Those types of people are making an impact. Joanna Spritz with the Chip in Batavia, she's making an impact on her community. There are certain types of people that really want to make a difference, and they go about doing it in a very proactive way.
I think making a difference is maybe the core aspect of feeling like you belong in a place, which may actually help us answer the question how you can belong in Batavia. So like, do you, in your mind, you see unique opportunities for people to make a difference or make a mark in Batavia?
The more people I talk to who are doing things like that, they have found things that are related to where they are in their season of life. So some people might get really involved in, for example, the children's PTO board because they've got several kids at the school and they want to see a change made. Or they're going to do the prom dress drive because they know someone that didn't have a prom dress and they want to do, you know what I mean? I think people are naturally drawn in the directions to serve in certain ways based on their own place in life.
Christine Clemens is a real estate broker with At Properties Christie's International Real Estate, one of Chicagoland's most trusted brokers, helping you buy, sell, and invest in real estate. For more information and to see how much your home is worth, text HOME to 630-797-8421 or go to christineclemens.com or click the link in the show notes. Much of our social media video content is created by Plimsoll, a marketing agency right here in our community, specializing in design, technical, and video solutions. They've partnered with us because they're passionate about helping local businesses and organizations thrive. Plimsoll works closely with its clients to understand their needs and develop customized solutions that meet their specific goals. If you're interested in developing a new brand identity, creating a website, or producing engaging video content, check out plimsollstudio.com to see how they can bring your ideas to life. This episode of Area Code Batavia is brought to you by Bulldog Plumbing. I'm not sure if you noticed, it's been raining a lot this summer, but you know who's always ready to help out in these situations. Our sponsors at Bulldog Plumbing. They're the local heroes keeping Batavia basements dry no matter how much rain we get. I've been living in Batavia for about 6 years, and we have yet to have a flooded basement. Well, except for a few times when our laundry sink overflowed. We got a sock stuck in the drain. That should be probably a cautionary tale for you. Anyway, I'm no expert, but I think the main reason we haven't had flooding from the outside is because of our sump pump. If you don't have a sump pump, you might want to consider it. Bulldog Plumbing has top-notch sump pumps and battery backups to keep your basement completely dry. Unless, of course, you have a sock in your laundry sink. I know from experience, a flooded basement is a headache you don't need. Call Bulldog Plumbing for peace of mind, knowing your home is protected. For more information or to schedule an appointment, visit their website in the show notes or give them a call at 630-313-9109. This is where I throw the outline a little bit out the window because there's a tension I've been exploring, I think, from the beginning, which is like, what is special, if anything, about Batavia that is not the case for other towns? And I have circled this every episode by definition, because some of the questions I'm asking are like, what can only be done in Batavia that you are doing? And a lot of times the answers are like, I mean, I remember if you go back and listen to the Foltos episode, Craig was like really, he like in that moment, in that question, pushed back against the premise of the question, which is like, no, this is just one place of many. There's not really anything special about it. Obviously, what's funny about that is like he, in my mind, is the last person I expected to say that because he's lived here forever, almost never leaves. And also like, he's just such a fixture and has been here forever. But it was really interesting because even after the episode was over and I was packing up my stuff, he was like, hey man, like, don't just focus on Batavia. Batavia is great, but it's not like, and I'm like, Craig, that is the podcast, what I'm supposed to call it, just like towns, area code, other towns.
Do you think though that's like imposter syndrome creeping in on Craig's part, or is it more? Well, I guess I say this from our own perspective is when you do something so naturally, A, you make it look easy, B, you kind of take it for granted, and C, and this is all my own personal imposter syndrome peeking in, like, you don't ever want to pat yourself on the back too hard because you just think of yourself as like a commodity. Like I love what we do here. I am happy to continue to be doing what we do at Plimsoll, but I always look at us and go, yeah, we're just doing what we do.
Do what we do.
You know, we do it. Totally. And I would say like Foltos probably has the same feeling, and that's why he's...
And Craig might have that feeling about Batavia. Like, this town is just a normal town.
Yeah, not that he takes it for granted, but I think we too always look around like, we love being a part of the Batavia community, but also I kind of look at it the same way Craig does and go, we're doing what we do here in Batavia.
It's also unique that he's been here for so long.
Yeah.
Like, people have been going to get their hair cut to him for generations.
Yeah.
So I feel like that's unique, and maybe it can't only be done in Batavia, but that's unique to him in Batavia.
It is, and this is sort of where I landed after. That made me, all of these encounters make me think a lot, and they all inevitably change the nature of the show going forward, which is, I could talk for hours about that. But one of the things I thought about a lot after that was like, okay, is Craig right? Am I just making a podcast that is sort of like clickbait for Batavians? I was just like, hey, you live in Batavia. Here's a podcast that's technically just about towns, a town et al. But it's actually like, it's you know, calling it a Batavian thing. I think the place I came to was like the stories and the people that live here are unique to it. That's true of every town itself, but those things are not true of every town. Like those specifics are not true. And I think it's, you know, it's exciting to me to be able to spotlight those individuals in a way that does make other people fundamentally care, you know, in some way.
Well, I think there is that macro level understanding that within any town, you're going to have this mosaic of people that call it home, this mosaic of businesses that are doing what they do every day. But what makes Batavia unique, and any town, USA, unique, is those individual personalities behind the business owners. But that is the thing that is hard to replicate. And when I think about everybody that we encountered in this little journey together, and when I think about the places that we frequent, you know, calling Batavia home, you can't get this elsewhere. You can't get that Craig Foltos experience, you know, in Geneva or in St. Charles. You might get something similar, but you're not getting the same. And I think that's where, coming full circle, like that's where it all comes back to, is there is something unique. Yeah, maybe you don't have to pat yourself on the back about it, but when you look at what you're providing and what we realized that all these businesses were providing their customers, that's hard to replicate.
Yeah.
And to replicate it well.
Yeah, I think that's true. I want to talk about challenges. It's important to me to reflect to the audience, to have an opportunity to tell the stories of things that were bad that happened, things that were struggles. There are reasons I asked the questions I asked in terms of like, what have you struggled with? Did this go the way you expected? And sometimes that can be a negative answer. Are there any things that jumped out to you in terms of like challenges that these businesses went through that particularly stuck out?
Oh, that's good. You know what? I don't think of any challenges other than, you know, I'm trying to wipe it from my vocabulary, but everyone just talking about how they were in just survival mode during the pandemic.
Yes. Yeah.
That to me is, again, something I want to.
I think that's the big one. Yeah, that's undeniable.
Yeah, it's kind of like this chapter in every business is, whether you're small, medium, large, enterprise, whatever you are, you had this moment in history, and I think everybody we encountered had something to say about it. What they had to do to either pivot, to make buy, or to get through that awful time. We had our own, right? Everybody did.
Yeah.
I would say that was probably the biggest one. The second is just that challenge of operating as a small, medium-ish size business. The challenge of operations, the challenge of staffing, the challenge of costs, the challenge of just being who you are on a daily basis, and not having to call it quits because you've got that larger mission. You've got those people that you want to keep hired. You've got those customers that love what you do. Those to me are like the two things that came top of mind. I don't know, Lauren, how about you?
I think another challenge is more so, or at least that we were seeing, was like awareness. Like letting people know what they're doing and how they're doing it.
Interesting.
Or even like product wise. Like for example, we went into Hearth and Hammer and like I was blown away by their merchandise and like the stuff that they carry there, which I had no idea. Same with Red Hive Market, like going in there and seeing all of the different merchants that they feature and being able to walk through the space and being like, wow, this is a great gift. I don't know why I didn't know this place was right here when it's right down the street. So for me, it was more of the awareness and trying to spread that to let people know what they're doing and how they're doing it.
Yeah, feeling like sort of lost in a crowd can be a hard thing. And in fact, like the podcast came out of the feeling of being lost in a crowd, actually. And I think a lot of businesses feel that way. One of the things that I noticed was, I interviewed Hearth and Hammer, I think, before they opened in that new location. The thing that I noticed was a little bit after that podcast was released, Annie wrote this really popular, I guess is the way you would say it, like Instagram post, basically saying small businesses are struggling really bad right now. And that was a moment where I was like, it is valuable. Because what that did, it did two things. It helped people know that's valuable. Like, obviously, that's the sort of on the face of it benefit, is like to say, hey, just so you know, like, we can't do the LinkedIn thing anymore and pretend everything's awesome. Guys, we're struggling and we need your help. But also, like, it helped other business owners to feel seen. And I saw something that happens a lot in Batavia, which is like a lot of Batavian businesses resonating with each other, sharing with each other, and supporting each other. And that's been like such a standout thing for me, is that in the middle of these challenges, just existing and being present with each other in the middle of it has been like, I don't know if uniquely Batavian, but it's felt Batavian to me.
Yeah, but that concept of sharing and supporting is something that, back to what makes Batavian a Batavian, what makes Batavia Batavia, is that comes so naturally.
Yeah.
You don't feel like you need to ask it or ask for it. You're going to get it before you ever A, thought you needed it, or B, had to get to that point where you're like, should I ask them if? No, it's already been answered.
Yeah.
And I think that's one thing that we've picked up on. And I mean, we're coming up on 3 years of calling Batavia home, our office. And that is the one thing where it has always been people in the community coming to us saying, hey, we got this thing. Where and how might you guys be able to help?
Yeah.
That to us is way more important.
Yes.
That there's that open outreach always to say, we want to get you involved. Do you want to be involved?
Yeah. Yes.
Going back to storytelling too, I think part of us being able, and the partnership with you and the podcast and being able to tell the stories of these individuals, I feel like it also makes those other smaller businesses that are listening to it want to help the other small businesses. Or even as a consumer, you learn about someone's backstory and why they created what they did, and it makes you want to support them. It makes you want to go into those stores. It makes you want to try Bocaditos and, try something new or whatever.
Yeah, totally. It's leaning into the whole point of why you would shop local in the first place, is like you want to be a part of this thing. You want to be invested. Let's talk about the impact that this series has had on you. And this is where it's starting to feel even more egotistical and weird for me. But I do think it's valuable to talk through. Again, all we're doing is amplifying other people's stories. And so what we're really talking about is which of these stories has impacted you the most. I'm curious. I mean, you talked about being surprised by all of these. Was there somewhere where you were particularly surprised by a story?
So I'd say Red Hive Market for me.
Yeah.
I was very surprised. And part of that is just based on the people that we met.
Yes.
There was a couple people that were working in the store retired firefighters, and my husband's a firefighter, so I resonated with that, and we just were talking, and I was telling him stories that I've heard about, his family and everyone else in the firefighting space, and just kind of relating back to that. So for me, it was more so personal instead of just business related, but I wouldn't have made those connections if we weren't there to see the business and to learn about it and to tell their story.
Yeah, makes sense.
I don't know if I have one, but I think the commonality that always surprised me, regardless of where we were at, was that mission beyond the mission that these businesses had. Like that their mission was to keep the doors open, keep their team employed, service their customer base, have the right products, whatever, the right services. But it was that mission behind the core mission that was always surprising to me, because everywhere we went, it's kind of like I went in thinking I knew them, and I left going, I had no idea they also did X. I had no idea they were also involved with Y.
Yeah.
That to me was what was constantly surprising, because in as much as, again, we've been here long enough, we've been to a majority of these places that we, help tell stories together about. Right. I always walked away feeling the sense of having learned something I didn't know before I walked in their door.
Yeah. For me, and this is not a business. So one of the later episodes we did was with a couple at Logan Street Baptist Church, Ruth and Edward Tusana. To be totally honest with you, I had been trying to figure out how and if to explore sort of the racial issues that have taken place, not just in Batavia, but in the Midwest, and how to sort of talk about that in a way that people could hear, in a way that people could sort of resonate with in some way. And they were not only very open and transparent about those things, but I think what I really was struck by and what really started this whole other thinking around tensions between different things, also came up in Red Hive a bit, was that Batavia was kind of a best case scenario for Black people in the Midwest in some ways. Now, I don't know how that compared to every town in the Midwest, but in particular, their perspective was once you leave Batavia, it got worse. They had to have these conversations with their kids, like you're going to college in some other town. And it was like some other Midwest town. It's not the same there. And that runs against my desire to help people know we got to do better. And I would encourage people to actually listen to the Red Hive interview, because weirdly enough, we talk specifically about this tension between, is it good? Is it better than most? But also, can we do better? And how do those work together? And I think it's really important to hold on to both of those things. That's a tension I struggle with a lot. For me, that surprised me quite a bit. I just didn't expect to hear that, because I kept giving them opportunities to, I often find that guests often want to be a little bit positive, political, whatever. Sometimes that happens. Sometimes it absolutely doesn't happen. But the times when it happens, I'm having to give them permission or at least tell them it's okay on this podcast to say somewhat negative things. Yeah. And so I gave them that opportunity in several ways, and it just was very clear that their experience was actually it was pretty good here. You couldn't even send your kid to school in Geneva. Who did you feel closest to after listening? And I think this is a very personal question that I think a lot of people might have unique answers to. It's not a ranking. It's not who's your favorite. But for me, Red Hive was probably it. And it's for a really idiosyncratic answer, which is that they interact with each other. That married couple interact with each other in exactly the same way my wife and I do.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I met them too. It's very relatable.
Wow.
Which is to say they just argue with each other. And it's not a big deal. They have differences. Some
eye rolls. And
yeah. Okay. And it was the number of times during that interview that they actively disagreed, said, yeah, that is not correct. That sort of thing.
You're misremembering that.
Yeah, exactly. Or even, I don't agree with that. I think the interview ended with a giant disagreement about whether big box stores will ultimately reign. You know what I mean? Which is such an intense argument to be having on mic in front of everyone. But it's I love that, because my wife and I often have those kinds of discussions in a group of people. And I feel I think they might be getting freaked out, because a lot of people aren't that. They're a little conflict averse in that way.
Sounds like Red Hive needs an episode part 2.
Or just, yeah.
Like an update.
Yeah. They're just really what you see is what you get kind of people.
Well, I think that what you just described, though, that's that visibility, accessibility, transparency, whatever word you want to throw on it, just that sense of real.
Yeah.
They weren't there, and I don't think, I mean, I guess that's hard for me to find one person and say, oh, I really resonated with that business. They all did, because they all just had this sense of real.
Yeah.
And I'd say ditto what you said on Red Hive Market. Like, I feel like what we heard in the podcast was exactly what you would get when you go into store. Yeah.
Right.
It's very authentic. That's who
true.
you're meeting.
Yeah.
So you kind of meet them in an audio realm, but then also they're the same in real life.
Yeah.
And there's that hard to replicate factor again. I mean, you could say the same thing about the creamery. You know, you can go ahead and get ice cream anywhere in, you know, within a 20-minute ride of this, but there is something different about a creamery experience versus going to, you know, your local Dairy Queen or something like that.
Yeah. I'm going to ask one last question. Taking from the principles we talked about here, what we stand to gain from telling and hearing each other's stories. With that in mind, how can we then lean into that? How can this community, how can we as individuals, how can businesses sort of create spaces and ways and encourage one another to tell those stories? Other than just like everyone make a podcast.
Or amp up your social media presence.
Yeah. Yes.
Come to us for your marketing needs and we'll tell your stories.
Exactly.
I mean, it's I don't want to call it like cheap or cliche, but it is just more about word of mouth, I think. Again, I was constantly surprised when we would go into a space, we would meet the business owner who we probably already kind of passively knew or organically had met at something or a networking event or something in Batavia. And then I'd be surprised by something, by their origin story, by the evolution of their business. And when I'm reflecting on those engagements now, I would go, okay, well, why didn't I know about that beforehand? Was there like just this weird, like it wasn't something to be shared? And I think it all comes back to promoting the stories of those places that you care about most, making it even casual. Like if we were to bump in and say, hey, you know, Richard, if you've never been to Sturdy Shelter, you got to check it out for X, Y, and Z reasons. Like not feeling like it's an obligation, but just to let others know that these places exist, that you care about them, that they're doing good stuff that's worth talking about.
Yeah, I also think businesses and us too, it's hard to talk about yourself and to get those stories out there because you feel like...
True.
It's the Craig Foltos imposter syndrome coming back.
Who's going to care about this origin story and why do people want to know about that? But I feel like that's what resonates the most with audience. Like, for example, our own social media, like everything that gets the most traction is personal. It's showcasing our employees. It's showcasing what we are doing in the community or what we have going on. And it's not necessarily the projects themselves and the work that we're doing. It's more of who we are as people. And
I think that's a big takeaway is like, stop feeling like people don't want to hear your story. This is something, talk about tension. Something I've been trying to figure out since I launched this podcast, but honestly, for 9 years since I moved to the Midwest. What is unique about the Midwest versus the South? If I could find, there's a lot of theories I have, but the thing I keep saying is neither one is better. It's just different, right? The thing about the Midwest is people do not like to talk about themselves.
No, not at all.
And I was like halfway through this season, 10 episodes in maybe, like, oh, I just started a podcast in the Midwest where I'm asking people to talk about themselves. This is going to be hard. It is not always easy to get people to do that. I think I want to end this podcast saying, do that. Like, be willing to talk about yourself. It's actually okay to talk about, you had this hardship in your life, or you have this feeling when you walk in the door, or whatever it is. Like, talk about the negative things. Talk about the struggles you have. Talk about the people and the businesses you love. I think that is such an important thing, and will only improve and change the community.
I'd like to think, too, for what you set off to do here and where and how you brought us on that journey, I would hope that that's inspiring people, businesses, to say, I'm going to get rid of the Midwesterner in me and say it's okay to, pat myself on the back. as a customer, I'm gonna share the fact that I love going to XYZ business all the time, and that's totally okay. And actually, I'm gonna prompt myself to remind the next time I bump into Richard to tell him about this thing. Mm-hmm. I would hope that was the big takeaway from this journey for a lot of your listeners, and especially for you personally on this. You're doing something, you love that something. Tell people about how and why you're doing what you do every day.
Yeah.
And I know it's tough. I know it's tough for us and it's tough for a lot of people, but if everybody can just kind of break through that initial barrier and realize it doesn't matter what you have to say as long as you believe in it, people are going to listen.
There's places and then there's communities. And I think the difference between those two things is that in a community, people are engaging with one another. And the degree to which you're engaging with one another is the degree to which you're a community. I think otherwise you're just a place. And maybe that's what's somewhat unique about Batavia compared to some of the other towns is like, I think Batavia does a good job of like creating spaces and ways for people to sort of share experience and even get involved in each other's experience. And that can be really valuable.
Everyone, business, people, individuals, families, all kind of coexist and mingle with each other.
Yeah.
Within all of the spaces that we've visited and with all the people that we've met. Like, it's not just the individual that, like Ben was saying, it's a community, which is bigger than just the individual.
Yep.
But I also think a lot of the businesses have evolved too. Like, they've listened to their customers and the people that come in, and then they want to help promote their merchants, and they want to bring in other people into their space to give awareness to them because they have this space. And I just think it's really great to be down the street from such a vibrant downtown area and small businesses.
Yeah, you talk about places. Places are transactional. Community is this ongoing loop.
Yeah. It's a feedback loop.
A feedback of conversation, of support, of whatever word you want to put on it, paying it forward, just that concept of being a part of something bigger than that which is yourself.
Yeah.
That's community. Everything else is just transaction.
Thanks for listening to Area Code Batavia. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode. If you enjoy this podcast, why not subscribe to our newsletter? Just click the link in the show notes and put in your email address. Not only will we let you know whenever there's a new episode of Area Code Batavia available, but each issue also brings you 5 concrete ways to experience a deeper sense of belonging in the community of Batavia, Illinois. Most importantly, if you know someone who would love to hear this podcast, please share it with them. Word of mouth is the best way to grow this community and help more people feel like they belong in Batavia, Illinois. Area Code Batavia is produced by Area Code Audio. It's hosted and produced by me, Richard Clark, with additional production help from Jennifer Clark.